Thank you for joining us for the 5 o'clock news. I'm Mallory Hughes.
And I'm Shayla Ruffin, and we're reporting for Culture Perspectives in Counseling.
Today we're going to be talking with you about housewives, working mothers, and professional mothers. Some of the struggles these groups face, bring in some research and interviews, and even an interview with a special guest at the end. We'll start off talking to you about house mothers and just some statistics about these groups. 53% of mothers preferred to work outside of the home. 45% of mothers would rather stay home with their children, but when asked if they would do anything differently, only 59% of mothers who already work outside the home said they would continue if they had the choice. Some reasons for these might be that college-educated women desire to stay more involved in the everyday lives of their children. Other mothers were pessimistic about going back to work and relying on their husbands to share more of the housework when they wouldn't be home to do it during the day, while other working moms felt that there was a lack of societal support for working instead of being at home with the children. But the key difference between house mothers who were happy with their work and house mothers who were unhappy with the housework was whether or not they chose their role. Some struggles of the house mother include loss of control. Mothers interviewed said that they felt less control over their lives than employed women. Other problems they face are depression and anxiety. 62% of full-time mothers reported that their biggest stress was not having enough time with other adults. This was reported in Parent Magazine, and it reflects some women interviewed who said that isolation and loneliness and lack of adult interaction was their main problem.
And feelings of inequality between the role of the homemaker and of the employed husband was also a problem.
Published in 2010 by economist Rachel Connolly, her study, The Time Use of Mothers in the United States at the Beginning of the 21st Century, describes the time single mothers, housewives, working mothers, and professional mothers spend at home and on the job, and how they divide the housework and childcare with their husbands. This table from the book describes the time constraints for single mothers in the blue lines and married mothers in the pink lines. Single mothers spend an average of 9 hours per week with their children in child care and excluding primary child care, which would be fun activities, reading a book, playing outside, things like that, while married mothers with jobs spend an average of 19 hours with their children, and house mothers spend an average of 22 hours with their children every week. You can see the big increase on the right two graphs during the weekend. Working women really take advantage of the time they're not at work to spend time with their kids, especially doing fun activities. This graph, also from the study, shows the difference between the time mothers spend in housework and the time fathers spend in housework and child care. You can see from the graph that women spend an extra 6% of their time on child care than their husbands, and an extra 7% on home production or housework than their husbands. The time mothers spend at the end of the day after they get home from their work outside the home is described as the second shift, which at the end of the year amounts to an extra month of work every year. The child care and housework is known as unpaid family work, which are the essential tasks of attending to the emotional and practical needs of all family members and maintaining the family home. If you put a price on housework, you might see some interesting things. Let's go over to Neil Cavuto at Fox News with the story on putting a price on housework. This includes price of housework for working mothers and house mothers. Neil?
But what if you tried to put a dollar value on what mom does and what she does for the family? Well, there's a new survey out that shows that home moms are worth $117,000 a year if you tally up all the work they do. Moms with jobs, $68,000.
Wow, that is a significant difference. Still, researchers say that 56% of house mothers actually, if they had it all over to do again, they would still choose to do a career, while only 21% of working mothers say that if they had a chance to actually stop working their jobs and stay home with the children.
That's true. Isn't there a significant difference between the hours they spend on housework versus the hours their husbands spend?
Yes, it is. On average, the men spend about 50 hours per week That's including housework and employment, while mothers actually spend around 80.
These hours reflect what's known as a leisure gap, in which wives sacrifice avocational activities, meaning things not related to their outside job, leisure activities, and sleep to get the housework and child care done. Women were also found more likely to adjust their home and work schedules around other people, such as their family members and their employers, because even when they're not at home, they continue to feel responsible for family members' well-being. The resource hypothesis is an important phenomenon in mothers' marriages. A partner's time is spent on unpaid family work as a consequence of either the husband's or the wife's resources compared to those of their spouse. The resource hypothesis is gender neutral until you consider which spouse has the higher resources. The partner with the higher resources will have more power and will therefore spend less time on the unpaid family work. Again, unpaid family work is housework and childcare. Because husbands are typically and actually potentially paid more than their wives, the resource hypothesis would support the men as the position of higher status and power, meaning that they are therefore less likely to participate in more housework and actually feel that they should not be asked to participate in the housework or do as much as the wife does. A result of the flexibility of the mother's schedule as determined by housework and children is the motherhood penalty. Women spend less time at work, so they're perceived to be less committed to the job. They therefore often get low commitment, low salary jobs, while men get the better job. And this really results in a tremendous lifetime impact on earnings. Women actually earn only 90% of what men earn in an average in a year. And this wage gap is actually increased in the high-income professions. For example, male physicians earn an average of $144,000 a year, while women physicians earn only $88,000 per year on average. This can also be referred to as a stalled revolution, in which mothers either scale back the amount of time they spend in paid work or they quit altogether, while some mothers who may not be able to afford to quit their jobs to devote more time to child care and housework may lower the standards of the housework so it doesn't take as much time to complete when they get home from work. Some struggles faced by working mothers and professional mothers are really reflected in their marital relationships. Unequal shares of household labor are associated with marital dissatisfaction, but this relationship is altered by perceptions of fairness. Perceived fairness had a positive correlation with marital happiness, in that the more fair each spouse saw the share of the housework, the more happy and satisfied the marriage was.
Another struggle faced by working mothers and professional mothers is, while the mother is out making sure her child's needs are met financially, the child may be suffering emotionally. This may cause the mother and the child to feel there is a lack of nurturance. Societal and personal views play a role in pressures put on mothers in parental relationships. Studies show that mothers who return to work soon after giving birth to their infant had previous high involvement within the workforce and have positive views about working mothers as well, while mothers who were unemployed during their child's infancy period were less likely to have been involved within the labor force before giving birth and were more likely to have negative views about working mothers, whether or not there was an economic situation within the family or not. Working mothers need child care. These women struggle to find high-quality, affordable child care, and research says that the U.S. is lacking in this area. Societal pressure makes one wonder what types of effects that child care will have on these children, and if any at all. For example, being away from the mother during the infancy period. Again, quality is very important to working mothers, making sure their child is well taken care of and all of his or her needs are met. Another difficulty is time distribution. Making sure her family's needs are met, having time for her children and her husband, and also having time for herself is a lot for a mother to juggle. This leads to another struggle, inter-role conflict. Inter-role conflict is when the demands of having several major life roles interfere with one another, are even incompatible with one another. Researchers say that this may be a significant factor in women's health, and several studies report that interrole conflict leads to depression and in some cases high levels of irritation and anxiety. One obvious struggle is stress. The stress caused by pressure coming from the need to take care of your household, your child, your husband, as well as attitudes and beliefs of the society.
Right.
And this is a struggle faced by most moms with all these pressures that are involved.
So with all the struggles faced by working mothers, why do they work?
Well, research says that most women in the labor force work primarily because the family needs the money.
Mm-hmm.
But the second reason is because for the woman to have her own personal self-actualization.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the working mothers reported that she liked making her own money and being able to provide for her kids, while another woman reported that she not only liked making her own money, but not only liked working to make her own money and provide for her kids, but also because of the company benefits offered.
Mm-hmm.
And the same mother reported that she also liked having other adults to have conversations with and to talk with, other than being around her children all day and only being able to talk with her husband.
Another woman interviewed stated that the sense of accomplishment is really important for her in maintaining a job instead of working at home.
So it seems that the social psychology of the workplace, with its social support system and adult companionship and contact with the larger world, as stated by one researcher, help provide women with something other than money, which is self-actualization.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about it from a women's perspective. There is also research from a men's perspective on the difference between the time women spend and husbands spend on housework and child care. Written in 2008 by psychologist Joshua Coleman is The Lazy Husband, and it's his study on the different times spent between housewives and working mothers and their husbands on housework and child care, and some things that women can do to help create a balance between her and her husband and their relationship. Let's go over to Charles Gibson at ABC News with an interview with Dr. Coleman.
Series, What's Love Got to Do with It? We got some women to talk about their lazy husbands. Here's some home video.
These are his clothes, exactly where they fell over the course of 5 or 6 days. I'm not picking these clothes up. Even the kids know that the dirty clothes go in the hamper.
So what can women do to get the men in their lives to get off the couch and into the laundry room? There is a new book now. It is called The Lazy Husband. And wait till you hear this. It was written by a man. A man. Joshua Coleman is joining us, the author of this book. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Guilty or innocent? You yourself.
Well, my wife refers to me as being a lazy husband in recovery. So I guess I was guilty, but now I'm innocent.
Tell me the symptoms of being guilty and tell me how you've reformed.
Well, guilty was that when our children were young, I was probably inclined to let her do most of the grunt work of the parenting, all of the laundry, all the cooking, probably most of the cleaning. And over time, pretty much as she got much more assertive, I ended up doing much more.
But it is interesting because more and more women are in the workplace. That has been a constant trend for the last 30 years.
Right, exactly.
40 years, probably. And as they spend more time at work, the numbers of hours they spend doing housework do not diminish.
Well, in general, women who work more, their husbands do more housework than those who don't, but they're still doing a disproportionate share.
Yeah, well, that 11 hours is, I think, a statistic that gets people to sit up and take notice.
That's right.
So, it's interesting that a man writes this book, and you wrote it, strangely enough, for women. If it's the men who have to reform, why are you writing for women?
Well, I like to write books that are going to be read. and men don't tend to read self-help books. Secondly, I don't think...
You're not going to get a man to write or to read this thing.
I'm not going to get
how
a man.
He ought to change.
Exactly. Most men don't think it's a problem because it basically works for them. However, the benefits to men for changing this are enormous. You know, there's a study by John Gottman who found that men who do more housework are associated with wives who want more sex.
I thought you might get to that as the first reason.
Well, we know that for men, a good sex life is one of the biggest predictors of marital satisfaction.
Sure.
So that's important. There's another study by Scott Coltrane at the University of California. He found that men who do housework in a frequent way with their children, those children do much better socially and academically. So the benefits to men are enormous.
I have a theory about that, actually, which I'll get to in a moment. But, but are there some things well, I know there are because I read the book, things that you suggest that women can do to get men to be, in your case, reformed?
In recovery.
In recovery, I'm sorry.
Either way. There's a lot of things that they can do. The first is that they have to be willing to negotiate standards. You know, the studies show that women who are willing not to be too much the experts around housework and parenting, who are willing to negotiate the standards, in those situations, men do much more. So that's hugely important. The next thing is that men tend to do more if they feel like their wives like them and respect them and admire them than if they feel like they're really mad at them all the time. So if you're going to approach your husband, typically conversations in the way that they begin, so you want to approach him with affection. Third, though, that sometimes isn't enough. It wasn't in my case. You know, sometimes you've got to be really assertive. You've got to be willing to get up in a guy's face and say, this is really important to me. You know, we're going to have to figure something different out. You got to be firm. You got to set limits, etc. Now, part of that...
you're not going to suggest... I was going to say, you're not going to suggest trading sex for housework, are you?
No, I'm not suggesting that you trade sex for housework, and I'm glad that you said that. Although some people do. Right. However... all of this stuff is important. See, it threw me off there.
I'm sorry. Well, I have a theory about this, which is mothers and sons. One of the problems is, and I think it's in my case, my mother pampered me, and when I'd throw my socks on the floor, she'd pick them up.
Well, exactly.
If you're a little tougher with your son when he's young, Mom, he will be a better person at housework when he gets older. I
think that's really true, and I think the more that we as men can role model that, the more our sons are going to do much more.
All right. This is good fun. The lazy husband. How to get men to do more parenting and housework. It's a subject that I think everybody's talked about in every house. And Joshua Coleman has written the book about it. If you'd like to read an excerpt from The Lazy Husband, go to GMA.
It was nice to have a man's perspective of how he sees the working woman and house mothers and professional women as well.
Sorry. And it's important to keep in mind within group differences, there are some mothers that were interviewed that said that they were able to maintain a close relationship with their children despite having to work outside the home during the day. So we've talked about what the research has said about some of the struggles faced by house mothers, working mothers, and professional mothers. With us today is special guest Dr. Michael Baltimore, the CSU Counseling Program Coordinator and a licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist. Dr. Baltimore, in your professional experience, what are some concerns or presenting problems that this population brings into therapy?
Thank you, Mallory. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Well, from my counseling experience and training, I think there's a lot of stress that comes into these types of situations. And, you know, these women have multiple tasks, multiple responsibilities, and I really believe that it's about management in lots of ways. It's managing the stress, it's managing the psychological component, but it's also managing the emotional component for them. The responsibilities obviously include child care and really managing how that works in their particular household. You know, everybody's different. And so all of these responsibilities that come on them can develop things like stress that we've talked about, but also anxiety. It can come out in depression. It can come out in some behavioral ways. And so I think a therapist trying to help this population should really do a thorough assessment to make sure that they're really kind of covering all of the different components in this person's environment. So it may be about, if they're married, for example, it may be about their relationships with their husband and with their family and the family members, particularly with their child in terms of child development. and then managing if they're working, how to manage that work environment. And then, so in a sense, it comes down to balance and just making sure, and with all of that in consideration, that a person's taking care of themselves, that they're really spending time making sure they follow through with all of the things they have responsibility for, but also including time for themselves. So it's very important to really do a thorough assessment at the outset.
Right. So what type of therapeutic models have you found successful with this population?
Well, I teach the counseling theory class, of course, and so I'm a proponent of all of these theories being helpful to a person, and sort of the therapist tailoring really what's the best theoretical approach to use for the person coming in. Now, obviously, there may be some anxiety or depression coming in, and some of the theories that address that, like the cognitive therapies, the cognitive behavioral therapies, where really we're focusing on what a person is thinking, how they're interpreting what's going on with them, and then that whole cognitive side of things. So I may want to look at that. I'm probably early in the process, I want to use a behavioral therapy approach to really get a baseline and an understanding of what behaviors are going on with them, with the people they have responsibility for, the children, with their spouses and all. So, it could be just any one of these theories. I like the reality therapy. I like the questions. What is it that they want, and what's blocking and stopping them from getting what they want? But I have to admit that sometimes it's about an existential approach. So it's really about the meaning, because sometimes people work so hard at getting and achieving their goals, they really don't take time for the inventory of really what's behind this, what meaning are they getting out of this, what's important in their lives. So those are just a few that I would look at. In particular, probably want to get a good history too, because as we know that folks who are parents, for example, have been parented themselves, and where did they learn that, and what are they trying to do with their children and focus on child development. If it's work related, we certainly want to look at some very goal-directed kind of approaches. So that didn't narrow it down to a single approach, but having an understanding of all of those theoretical approaches, I think you can really kind of tailor it to the person coming in to meet their needs.
What would you say would be a better approach for the maybe the house mother who is depressed and not being around so many people feels isolated?
Well, that's very interesting. Right now in the theory course we're teaching this particular semester, we've just started to look at the cognitive behavioral side. In the cognitive therapies, Aaron Beck sort of stands out in his cognitive therapy for depression. That's a famous book. He's written the Depression Inventory. And so that particular model looks at what a person is thinking, how that thinking manifests itself in their behavior, and so forth. So I think that's one of the ways that I want to start out. And the Beck Depression Inventory might be a good tool to use early on. I want to do a thorough assessment, I've mentioned before, to make sure that we're kind of covering all this the bases, where we do a suicide assessment and all of those other kinds of things that come in when there's clinical depression involved. Mm-hmm. I want to know about their lifestyle and the stresses in there. Somebody told me a long time ago that the treatment for depression is activity. And that's kind of an interesting note, but a lot of times you see clients who come in to even get admitted to a psychiatric hospital for clinical depression, and others, that the medical team, the psychiatric team, the psychology team will get this person up and active and moving. And so activity does play a very important part of that. I think sometimes there has to be some rewards for that activity. It has to be tailored again to the individual.
Okay. On the other side of that, I guess, would be the mother, the working mother and the professional mom who maybe has a lot of stress. Do you suggest any type of stress management models? Or?
Yeah, I think we all should know in our training program, becoming counselors, in some of these models and dealing with stress. Mm-hmm. The old adage that relaxation is a great therapy for stress really holds true. Jacobson in 1938 wrote a book about deep muscle relaxation. Those techniques that came from way back then are still true today, that we learn to find the tension in our bodies and work through that from that side of it, and understand that the importance of relaxation and understanding that piece. The cognitive side of it, again, where we were kind of tracking what a person is thinking before, during, and after events, and their stress levels going up. And then the behavioral changes, where we're really looking at how we might change something in the environment, change the work schedule to add more flexibility and more choice for the client. So those are the kind of things I want to look at in that case.
Okay. Well, we thank you, Dr. Baltimore, for being with us today and sharing your information, your valuable information. And
well, it's been my pleasure to be here with you, and good luck on the assignment.
Thank you.
So that was some very valuable information Dr. Baltimore gave us from a professional counselor's perspective. Shayla, what does some research say about some other therapeutic models that may be successful in working with mothers?
One of the suggestions that I found to come up a lot in working with women was actually feminist therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a type of non-sexist type therapy. It has all the principles of non-sexist therapy, but in feminist therapy, the therapist emphasizes socio-political change as a basic to personal change. And that seemed to be that seemed to work really well with women, and I think it would work really well with women of this population. And another branch off, I guess you would say, from the feminist therapy was consciousness raising and self-help, which is done without a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing research, I realized that they don't like to say that it is therapy, but an alternative to therapy. And in consciousness raising and self-help, women groups get together and basically raise awareness about womanhood,
mm-hmm.
and take pride in being a woman, while still keeping in mind the societal views and how to change them,
mm-hmm.
and to still be a strong, self-actualized woman.
Right.
Another suggestion was cognitive behavioral therapy, because of the depression that many women experience in relation to either being house mothers or for the working woman,
mm-hmm.
having so much stress and anxiety put together. Cognitive behavioral therapy was something that seemed to work really well.
Some couples therapy or family therapy might also be really successful for this group. You're talking about building communication skills, how to say when they need more help, when they need less help. Also setting some boundaries and trying to work on decision-making skills so that it's a more balanced relationship. And like the research we stated earlier, the more balance, the more marital satisfaction. Narrative therapy can also be helpful for this group. Narrative therapy is basically they're living a story, and so far their story has been dissatisfaction with their marriage because of imbalance in the housework and childcare, or just stress between their conflicting roles, as Shayla described earlier. What narrative therapy could do could help them come up with a new story where there's a more balanced relationship between them and their husbands, a more balanced relationship between their work lives and their home lives, and then how to live that new story. Shayla, tell us a little bit about women trying to go back into the workforce after they've been home with their kids.
Well, career counseling seems to work really well with women in that part of the population, because it helps them to learn what exactly they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
It helps them to learn techniques of how to find what's right for them and how to actually enter the workforce again.
Okay. Also, part of what may be important in therapy for this population is advocacy for the client. Some others may have a hard time getting into the workforce. They may not have the education they need or full enough resume to enter the workforce in a strong way. So what some groups have started Project Working Mom. It's a group that gives working mothers a scholarship to go to some prestigious online schools that helps them get a degree, so when they're ready to go back into the workforce after staying home with the children for a few years, they can do so in a better way. And CBS News has the story.
At 11 starts right now. Tonight, some local moms are setting an example by starting over, getting the education they couldn't pursue because of work and family.
For many, it seemed an impossible dream until now. Tonight, Dawn Hasbrook shows us the resource helping them reach their goal.
Hello, my name is Marcia Webb Donnarummo.
This letter changed the life of a mother of 4 from Templeton, Massachusetts.
Much to my chagrin, I did not complete my bachelor degree program when I was younger.
49-year-old Marcia Webb Donnarummo has had a full plate for as long as she can remember. She had to drop out of college for financial reasons. Then came marriage, kids, and a full-time job.
I feel that I need to complete my degree so that I can be marketable long-term. And it's just something I've always wanted to do, is to say that I have that degree.
It all came together when Marcia found Project Working Mom on the internet.
Working moms face the most barriers in trying to go back to school.
The biggest? Money to pay for it. So Project Working Mom hooked up with 5 online colleges to offer scholarships to worthy candidates.
The crux of the application hinges on the personal essay. In that essay, we ask applicants to discuss their personal and professional goals and how an online degree would help them reach those goals.
Completing my degree would challenge me, expose me to new things, force me to embark upon a new adventure.
Marcia's letter won her a full scholarship to American Sentinel University. E-learning allows her to study from home and continue her full-time job.
Because it's such a gift for me, I'm going to do it no matter what it takes.
I think she really deserves it. She really works hard and helps us all the time, so it's really great that she gets to do this kind of for herself.
And as her letter reveals, it's really not just for herself.
I want to show my children that although the path may be long and at times seem insurmountable, that to pursue your dreams is the way to live your life.
Although the program was originally called Project Working Mom, it's now open to dads, too. So far, 94 moms and dads have been awarded nearly $4 million in scholarships.
Some ways that Project Working Mom might take place in the therapy setting is helping the client to build that personal essay describing their situation, why it's important for them to go back to school. Also maybe some resume building as part of the career counseling, and those two can really be combined to help the mother enter the workforce and feel more confident about it when she does.
Yeah, so Project Working Mom and career counseling go hand in hand, it seems.
Yeah. All right, well, that concludes our broadcast on house mothers, working mothers, and professional mothers. And we hope that you've learned a lot about this group, some struggles that they face, and maybe some ways that counselors in the community can help this population overcome their concerns. I'm Mallory Hughes.
And I'm Shayla Ruffin. Thank you
for joining us.